at the top of the temple Shikhara. That is the Purna Kalash, when everything is complete, everything is whole. So this form, the same form remained. The function changed, the use changed, but the symbolism remains same. Like the lotus flower has indeed played a very important role in the iconography. The rathas, as we call it, the various geometry and the mathematical proportions involved in with the rhythm of the universe. And that is what the tal, that the embryo is an ultimate symbolism. That is the philosophical belief. This Aries, the sun, the shape of the stars, if you join them, gives the shape of a, and sun was the primordial god, as we see it in Gayatri Mantra, which is the most precious mantra in the Vedas, which is a Vahan of Ganga here, had changed to Magar, Mazar, Mizara or Mishar. Bull is a symbol of power, symbol of fertility. It is seen as a Nandi, strength, as a symbol of strength, loyalty, devotion. Riding on an elephant, elephants becoming signs of purity. Later on, Vishnu becomes equal to Narayan, the water. Ancient Rome, everywhere you see the symbolism of an eagle. And in Egypt, in Japanese, in Bactria, in Phoenicia, in Mesopotamia, everywhere we see the same symbols. These symbols are powerful, and how this power can be utilized. They are following some belief system that if somebody's house has to be made, it has to be grand. You bring it forward. So emphasis on functionality, simplicity, new materials, new technology, where these type of symbolisms are gracefully used. Charles Jenk's contribution to architecture is very important in postmodern architecture. One fine day, I get a phone call that there is an architect's meet at Udaipur and can you speak? I said, why not? The next question asked that on what I should speak. Anything you like, sir. That put me in the great problem because I didn't know on what I should speak. My next question was whom I should address to. The answer was architects. The problem increased. And as you know that we are teachers, so we don't tend to stop before 55 minutes once we start speaking. So I saw the brochure. It says that 30 minutes time of my presentation. I immediately WhatsApp that, okay, I am preparing my slides for 30 minutes. Prompt came the reply, sir, prepare it for 25 minutes. I thought that this fellow might be getting some feedback from one of my students to curtail me down in speaking. So, nevertheless, I thought that this will be the area where I am still working on. It is my passion to work on architectural history and philosophy of architecture. As Pandya sir has mentioned that history is something dead, but the tradition is alive and continues. I believe that what makes history dead or alive is the philosophy that runs behind creating what we today call as historical buildings. And architecture, I believe, is also, apart from forms and function, is also an expression of symbolism. The symbolism lies deep-rooted into our culture, into our language, how we speak, how we behave, how we are accustomed to look at things. So based on this, I'll just run through the huge area which I am trying to cover actually. I agree that this is not extensive, this is not all, but something I wish to share with all of you. And of course, your feedbacks, your inputs will help me in do my research further. Architecture as an art from embodying philosophical and symbolic expression, reflection of values and convents of deeper meanings in the forms, materials and spatial arrangement. So that is where I always pondered that when we see a piece of architecture, what is the deeper meaning of it, what it tells to us. Now, that leads us to the question of architectural philosophy. There is the underlying principles which guide the design and construction, which involves within itself the aesthetics, functionality, relationship between environment and users, etc. Now, in philosophy and architecture, we take influences from the historical eras, the modernism, the postmodernism, the existential, the phenomenological, the humanistic philosophies, or to strive at least to questions of meaning, the identity issues, or to interplay between the physical built environment and the abstract concept. This is the abstract concept which Pandya was just not telling about Anubhuti, the abstract concept of something which we imagine, which we try to create. And that is what I believe is architecture is all about. In historical context, the evolution through different periods, the contribution to the ancient civilizations, and the unique philosophical and symbolic elements that led to create this architectural landscape which we are inheriting today. And this architectural symbolism, if you go for symbolism, it gives specific message to specific elements that we are using in the buildings. It may be in the form of structures, decorations, and spatial organization, or it can be a reflection of cultural, religious, and historical elements also. So, symbolic representation can be a tool for communication, a tool for exhibiting the cultural, religious, and historical symbols, or incorporation of metaphors, allegories, or visual representation in an architectural symbolism. So all this taken together, you can all understand that is a huge area. It involves a huge array of things, but we'll try to concise it and see how we can see this symbolism and philosophy are, or rather were expressed in architecture earlier, and how they are still being expressed, and what we can think of in our future architectural examples, how this philosophy and symbolism can play a role into it. So for example, the Egyptian temples and the pyramids, the only one belief that there is an afterlife, that the soul of the pharaoh is returned back to the dead body, has led them to create these pyramids. Isn't this amazing? That belief system, how it helped to generate form, just to understand that how the belief system exactly works. So these symbolisms reflect the cultural representation, or they can also reflect the narrative expression, being myths, legends, or historical events, or emotional connection on identity or placemaking. So anywhere, what aspect we look at the building, we feel the building, we use the building, can give us the impression of symbolism, and the symbolism really helps us to understand these impressions. So for example, when we look at the classical architecture of Europe, that is the Greek and the Roman architecture, the emphasis is given on the proportion and symmetry, the perfectness, the golden mean, the golden ratio, the Fibonacci series, the whole mathematics behind it is expressed through it. And interestingly, if we look at the form-based architecture, the Bhaja and Karle caves, the apsidal ended form of the Karle Chaitya halls, which is in Indian traditional architecture is Gajaprastha style of architecture, is seen in the Bhaja, it is seen in the Ajanta, or it is seen in the Sanchi style, Sanchi site. The ruin is there. We don't know which temple was that, but it is in the Durga temple of Aihole, Pattadakal. And the same form is used in the Mithraeum of 3rd century AD in Walbrook. Mithra is a god which is believed to be the sun god in ancient Europe. And amazingly, in our Sanskrit books, in the Rig Veda, Mithra is another name of the sun god. Why these two connected? That is a question. Then this form of Mithraeum later on influenced the hall of people to gather into Roman basilicas, which are the law houses or courthouses of the Romans, and ultimately led to the formation of the basilican churches. So this form, the same form remained, the function changed, the use changed, but the symbolism remains same. something has to do with this symbolism. I don't know. Is it the form thought very pure? Because right from the early days of these Chaitya halls to the basilican churches, it is always used for some religious buildings. This is the connection between earthly and divine, maybe. The Indian architecture, when we see rich symbolism, whether it is the Brideshwara temple or even the Taj Mahal, the rich symbolism of temples and palaces, motifs. The temples are sometimes analyzed as anthropometrics data of some Virat Purush, and the symbolism, the yantras, which are made with simple circles, squares and triangles, various complex yantras, various complex mathematical formulae, etc. are generated to create this. And this type of symbolisms, like the lotus flower, has indeed played a very important role in the iconography and the overall philosophical concept of our ancient texts also. Now, the allegory. Allegory is something that, if you take the symbolism of passing from one space to another space, ultimately leading to the Garbhagriha of Lingaraj temple of Orissa, and then you can see here that the temple itself is when you go into the Garbhagriha, it is very small, but the structure soars high, leading to another axis which is vertical going towards the top. So this leads materialistic and spiritual upliftment of people, which is totally based on philosophy. Again, the various types of the temple plan forms, the rathas as we call it, the various geometry and the mathematical proportions involved in creation of the rathas indeed creates an inquisitiveness in our minds that what led to develop these things. Why did the people took so much of pains to do it? Because they believed in one thing, that everything here has to be perfect or with the rhythm of the universe, and that is what the tal, man, etc., which were measured in the ancient Shilpa Shastras, are matching with this type of temple forms. I'm not going into the details of this, just a glimpse. Now, this is the movement, the physical axis of the movement from the outside to the Garbhagriha. And why it is called a Garbhagriha? It is the place where the embryo sits. And I believe that the embryo is an ultimate symbolism of something which is in between form and inform or unformed. So from there, if you trace back your journey from full form to something in between to absolute formlessness at the top of the temple Shikhara, that is the Purna Kalash, when everything is complete, everything is whole. That is the philosophical belief of these people who had made philosophies into their architectural examples. They could make it. The temple is also seen as an anthropometric data, as I said. This axis, or the vertical shikhar of the temple, is often compared with the Meru, and Meru Danda is the spinal cord. So the spiritual upliftment of meditation is allegorically symbolized into the design of the shikhara of the temple. There are myths, there are stories associated with it, like the churning of the Samudra Manthan with the axis mundi, that is the Mount Mandar, which is the churning of the spiritual axis of our yoga. Now, these symbolic expressions in architecture has the geometrical shapes or use of natural elements or use of religious symbols. I'm not going into the details of this. We are all accustomed to this. Rather, we are so accustomed to these symbols that we hardly realize these symbols that they are existing. But it is all around us. Say, for example, I'll give you one example. The sun symbol, the symbol of the sun. In India, in the summer months, the astrological sign is Mesh Rashi, the Aries. And this Aries, the sun, the shape of the stars, if you join them, gives the shape of a goat or a lamb. So goat has become the symbol of sun. And not only in here, the goat is named as Aja in Sanskrit. The god is also named as Aja, unborn in Sanskrit, and in the similar name. And sun was the primordial god, as we see it in Gayatri Mantra, which is the most precious mantra in the Vedas. Now, this symbolism, the goat now started symbolizing power, fertility, rejuvenation. All the characteristics that we get from the sun are imposed over to the goat. Not only this symbolism of goat has gone to, we see it in the slide of the seal of Indus Valley, to the sculptures of France, where Reims hosted this pagan religion or pagan functions, where these horned characters were worshipped, and they were worshipped as the sun. So these are these cultural syncretisms which unites various cultures together with the same symbolic traces. Not only this, you see that this Aja is seen in the statues of Daksha, where the man has a golden head of a goat. The same goat face is seen in the drawings of Zeus or in Jupiter. The same goat face is represented in the mummies of the pharaohs who sported this long beard as goat, and also in the West Asiatic statues we see this goatee form, and this goatee is all we know of, is also a symbolism of that sacred goat. The Aja has become Asian. Even today, the national flight of Greece is Asian flights. So that area is known as Asians. Aja is become Asians, transferred to Aegyptos, and then the word gypsies come to it. Now, similarly, the Tropic of Capricorn, Makar, which is a Vahan of Ganga here, had changed to Magar, Mazar, Mizara or Mishar, because they are towards the Tropic of Capricorn. So all this type, even etymologically, the words are so similar and the symbolism is so strong that it is hardly difficult to deny it. The horn of the goats is the volute of the ionic columns. Again, the word ion is related to the sun. Egyptian symbols also relates to some sort of pictures, some sort of seals with people with horns. That is the representation of goat. That is the symbolism of sun. Now, coming from goat to the bison or the bull. Bull is a symbol of power, symbol of fertility. It is seen as a Nandi, strength, as a symbol of strength, loyalty, devotion. And this is a sculpture of Mithras, which I saw it in the baptistery of Pisa. The same thing, the same person is killing a bull. So killing a bull and killing a buffalo and worshipping a bull was a tradition all over the world. In any of these symbols, you will find that different places of the world were worshipping bulls or buffaloes or killing buffaloes. It is in Hinduism, it is in Mayan culture, it is in ancient Mesopotamia, it is in Greece, and there are biblical references also about this. In Mahabalipuram, the famous picture of Mahishasuramardiನಿ, the buffalo being slain by this lady, or in Greek sculpture, the buffalo is being killed by people, the famous bull of Mohenjo-daro seal, and again another photograph of Mithra killing a bull. So this is strange that this somewhere sometimes a bull was killed, and that killing is glorified in all the religions of the world. Specifically, when you come to this drawing, this seal of Mesopotamia, where you see a lady riding on a lion with some arms on her, and then this lady kills a bull who has been put inside the ground, and this is known as Inanna, or the goddess of fertility, which is worshipped in Mesopotamia and some in the northern parts of today's present-day Afghanistan. So Inanna is believed to be the Vedic derivation of Indrani, another name for Durga, and the temple of Hinglaj, which is Shaktipeeth, is believed to be the temple of Inanna or Binani to the local Muslims. So the same symbolism continues. Indrani becoming riding on an elephant, elephants becoming signs of purity, and then Lakshmi associated with an owl, and the Durga killing a Mahishasur associated with the goddess with owl, and the Inani who is riding on a lion and flanked by owls, carrying an Egyptian ankh in her hand, like this. You see, the same symbolism is associated all through the world in all across the cultures. Is it a coincidence? Same thing, Garud, or the famous Vahan or the vehicle of Vishnu. Vishnu in Vedas is a sun god. Later on, Vishnu becomes equal to Narayan, the water of water. But initially, he is believed to be the sun god. And Vishnu has Garud. Garuda is seen in the American symbol, Garuda in Malaysia, Garuda in Zoroastrian religion, Garuda in other countries also, in Greek, Egypt, Christianity, Native American, ancient Rome, everywhere you see the symbolism of an eagle. Even today, sun is worshipped as Garuda, as Garud Stambha in our temples, and the national symbol of United States of America is a bald eagle. That eagle continues. The eagle remains the same. See, these obelisks, the Arun Stambha in front of some temples of southern part of India, is the obelisk in front of the temple of Ammon, the temple of sun god in Karnak, Egypt. This is also seen as an upright obelisk known as Yupa in the Vedic periods, which is placed where the yajna is performed. And the same thing you see in across different culture. This is St. Peter's, Rome, where you see at the center they have cut an obelisk from Egypt, placed it here just to dedicate it to the sun god. You believe me that I personally went to Vatican 4 times to find out a single symbol of cross in it. Today, there is no cross inside the holiest shrines of the Christians in Vatican, St. Peter's. There is only symbols of sun. Right from the very beginning, where you enter it with an obelisk dedicated to the sun god by the ancient Egyptians. And various other symbols like this Star of David is famous as a symbol of the Jewish people. But not only Jewish, in India we see it as a yantra. Sri yantra is the two triangles set opposite to each other creates this yantra form. And in Egypt, in Japanese, in Bactria, in Phoenicia, in Mesopotamia, everywhere we see the same symbols. So symbolism comes in a very strong way, and it is being represented in architecture in so many ways that we see them, but we hardly observe them. And that is where we must be making ourselves aware that how these symbols are powerful and how this power can be utilized in our creations of today. See the Ankh of Egyptian statues and the Nus or Pasha in the statue of Raja Rani temple at Odisha. These structures, one is in Mesopotamia, other is in Saqqara, other is in Cambodia, this one is Mexico. I have shown the places in the world map. Are they coincidental? Did they happen just like this, without passing on any information? And everywhere it is said that these stories can go up to a maximum of 7 stories. Saptatal. Not everywhere there are 7 stories, but the literature says that they can go maximum of 7 stories. And here in our texts, Vedas, they say that the Swarga has 7 tals or the Patal has 7 tals at the bottom. That 7 number is important. The same structure is made everywhere. Why are they inventing the wheel separately everywhere, or were they connected? Again, that going to the top through tiers or tals of pyramids or through huge spires is a symbolism associated with Gothic architecture, with the pointed arches and the ribbed walls, the flying buttresses. Then in the Renaissance period, we see again coming back to the geometry, because the West, like the ancient Greeks and Romans, has always kept stress on the formal geometry, which is very perfect to look at. The Duomo of Florence or the St. Peter's. The Baroque period is again going a flowery way. Dynamic, ornate forms, grandeur and opulence were the call of the day. And that is how these buildings were designed. They were, after all, they were following some belief system that if somebody's house has to be made, it has to be grand. That is the philosophy. That is the belief system of that period in Europe. Islamic architecture, infinite nature of Allah and unity of creation. So all the structures has to be same, without any ornate. Only the immense creativity of God is depicted in the inscriptions or the calligraphy work of the Islamic structures like the mosques. And arabesques and makranas were made. You can see that photograph at the corner where intricate detailing were done. Why one should take so much of pain to do it? Just because they believed in one philosophy. In China architecture also, that yang and yin philosophy, the positive and the negative, how to do away with the positive and how to bring back the, do away with the negative and how to bring back the positive. And there's a harmony with nature, axial symmetry, etc. Feng Shui principles came, and these are all used in Chinese architecture. Coming to modern architecture, these philosophers like Descartes, Immanuel Kant, Friedrich Nietzsche, they said that the call of the day was clarity, simplicity and functionality, and these have clear-cut architectural manifestation. I will not read the slide, but we can show you some example that this is the examples of modern architecture. We have just seen this Guggenheim Museum and the Opera House, where as the name of modern architecture, clear-cut forms, clarity. If you are making some metamorphosis or allegory of certain things, make it boldly, whether it is a Nautilus shell or that is a sail of a ship. You bring it forward. So emphasis on functionality, simplicity, new materials, new technology, then clean lines, open spaces, and this is Villa Savoy and Van der Rohe's Seagram building. This we all know as exemplars of architectural pieces which are the stepping stone of modern architecture. So from the Renaissance Baroque period, we are entering into modern architecture through these buildings. These are indeed having a great philosophical background. Without this philosophy, we might not have designed this kind of building. Then in postmodern period, like philosophers like Martin Heidegger, Jacques Derrida and Jean-Francois Lloyd talked about ambiguity and plurality. Now they are seeing the world. They are seeing what is happening in the other parts of the world. You cannot be judgmental, saying that this has to be architecture and this is not architecture, or this has to be there or this has not to be there. So plurality and going back to the past, that is historical context. This has resulted in Philip Johnson's building, where he just incorporated a pediment with a punch at the top, just as a decorative feature of architecture, the statement that history is still important here. Similarly, this Piazza d'Italia by Charles Moore and Perez architects, 1978, they just created this Roman architectural style within New Orleans to create what history has to teach us. These are only people criticize these type of architectures like irony, pasties, or symbolic reflecting critique of modernism. But anyway, they are there and they are the footprints of our progress towards finding out some meaning out of architecture, some meaning of our philosophy, some symbolisms which we were carrying as in our backpack since the earlier days. Now, the same thing, the Vana Venturi house in Philadelphia by Robert Venturi, going back to the past, creating some forms using bold colors by this building of Sir Jim Starling. And then integration of humanistic, existential, phenomenological and philosophies in architecture. The characteristic of humanistic was to emphasize on the classical forms. Example, copy the past. Then existentialism is, the metaphor is the symbolism play with light and shade representing death and life, and so on. This type of architectural works can be seen in the works of Wright, Ando and Zumthor. The examples are quite famous, Falling Waters and the Church of Light and the Tharme Walls, where these type of symbolisms are gracefully used for portray the philosophies that these people were believing into. Phenomenology uses architecture as a place where phenomenon take place or some experience are gathered, and that is why the use of materials, symbolic representation, legibility, texture, etc. becomes important, as in the works of Arvar Aalto, Stephen Hole and Louis Kahn. I need not say anything, the pictures will tell it how the phenomenology works. Particularly Louis Kahn's Salk Institute is a beautiful example of phenomenology. And coming to the last slide, the contemporary architecture, the modern architecture is deconstruction. Then again, breaking into new things. Like for example, I've given you the first slide where I showed you the embryo in the temple Garbhagriha, that is going from form to formless. Deconstruction is something like that, going from form again to formless, deconstructing what you have created. Charles Jenks' contribution to architecture is very important in postmodern architecture, and like the conveying modern society's intricacies to culturally significant symbol. Again, Charles Jenks literally has said that significant symbols are very important to be used in modern architecture also. So, contemporary architecture allows interpretations based on individual experiences. Deconstruction architecture uses fragmented shapes to symbolize contemporary life's turmoil, uncertainty, and boundary breaking. That might be another explanation of deconstruction. And modern architects are more aware of their cultural environment, using symbols representing local histories, identities, and tales. Sustainability is often used as a symbol of environmental responsibility. So everything what we talk about today, what we were talking since afternoon today, is based somewhere linked with the philosophy and the symbolism that we carry in our backpack. Thank you.